Yeah, I've been curious. What did you do in college?
Well, I did a lot of things. Amongst them, I studied history, with the Soviet studies being part of what I really focused upon while working also at the Carter Center. Subsequently, got my law degree.
Do you know anything about the Cold War?
Yeah, I know a lot because it was, in fact, a Cold War. And on top of that, your grandparents are from those countries involved in Eastern Europe and were directly affected by. Where did we get this term Cold War? What the Cold War did, in effect, controlled free speech as we knew it, at least from 1947 through what we consider the end of the Cold War, which is 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union.
But how did the Soviet Union fall?
So we got to start from the beginning, the background. The background becomes the end of Europe, becomes the division of Germany, the division of Western and Eastern Europe. We start with things such as the Truman Doctrine. The country of Greece, in fact, becomes a proxy battleground between the capitalist West and the communist East. We also start by looking at our own government, asking ourselves, what within our government do we have to fear? Part of this became the National Security Act of 1947, which today we have learned was the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency, otherwise known as the CIA. We also have to go back in time and ask ourselves, what did the Americans want within Europe?
Well, I'm guessing the Americans wanted to spread capitalism, right? Spread democracy.
Well, let's talk about the greatest fear at the end of the Cold War. What do you believe the greatest fear in society was?
Communism?
What had occurred in Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Two very big bombs went off.
Correct. And what did we
A
learn?
lot was destroyed.
What did we learn from Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
That humans could at any moment destroy the world.
For a number of years, up until approximately 1949, who's the only nation on Earth that had an atomic weapon?
United States.
Correct. So imagine we're the United States and imagine you're the Soviet Union. And you're both the only remaining superpowers, and you each fear that the other one wants to challenge superiority with their way of life. So now you look and say, what is it that one side can do to the other? It can blow them up. You know what happens in 1949?
Soviets get an atomic bomb.
Correct. What do you think that does to the American psychological way of life?
They think, at any moment we could all go.
Correct. So, the 1950s begin with what conflict, Kyle?
The Korean War?
Correct. And you know it's never called a war? Did you know that? It was called a conflict. President Truman decided that rather than need the authority of the Congress, as long as he considered it a conflict, we were okay. And our side was South Korea, and of course we were fighting North Korea. And during this period of time, we also learned that there was a great fear in this country of infiltration of communism in our society and government. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And we watched a movie a few nights ago. Do you remember the movie?
Is it the Hollywood Blacklist?
What was the name of the movie we watched?
Good Night and Good Luck.
Correct. So Kyle, the Nixon bill, it never passed?
Yeah. It was, I'm pretty sure, if I'm correct, it was a law that basically made it illegal to be a communist.
Yeah.
Which, well, the thing is, because we have the First Amendment, right? You have the freedom of speech and, the freedom of, religion, freedom to believe in anything you want, right? Nixon bill, I don't really think that would have been constitutional.
Well, think about this. Imagine if you got together with your friends in high school and formed a political group, and somebody said, just you guys forming a political group, nothing else, would land you in jail. How would you feel?
I would feel like my rights were violated.
Right. Are you familiar with the senator from Wisconsin?
Joseph McCarthy.
Correct.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney's buddy.
Joseph McCarthy.
So Joseph McCarthy, what do you think he stood for?
He basically thought that communists had infiltrated the government and was trying to get them out.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really didn't really use a lot of due process. He basically used his accusations as evidence of someone being a communist. And unless they personally denied it or ratted other communists out, they were guilty.
So, under McCarthy, was there a lot of fear amongst people in Hollywood?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. After all, there was like the Hollywood 10, right? The 10 people who, when they were, said to be communists, they didn't respond. They didn't rat other people out. And because of that, they weren't allowed, they couldn't work. They couldn't find jobs. Some people even killed themselves because they couldn't find work.
These were screenwriters, am I right?
Yeah, screenwriter. I think there were some actors too. Right? Everyone.
And
it's just Hollywood.
What do we notice as the 1950s in McCarthyism started to wane? What do we notice the change in movies?
I'm guessing movies became more progressive.
Correct. Movies became more progressive, more liberal. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did we notice about things such as comic books?
There started to be more like topics and themes that, so in comic books after, the fall of McCarthyism, there was a lot more topics that were maybe not, so cheery, right? There was, drug abuse, right? There was, villains could be sympathetic, right? There could be, the rich guy could be the villain.
So the comics...
Less censorship.
Comics Code of 1954. What does that do to you as far as, does that signal anything as to how we wanted to make comic books look like?
Cheery. A version of reality where the good guy always wins.
Okay.
Where nothing really ever goes wrong.
Right.
Kind of like a farce.
Music. What do we notice the changes in music?
1960s?
Yeah.
Well, you can look at, for instance, Bob Dylan, right? Music becomes kind of more progressive, right? Because of that change, And, you get the Beatles, you get the bigger than Jesus statement, right? Some musicians start taking drugs, right? Some songs start to get written about drugs. We get the whole genre of psychedelic music.
As we left the 1950s, Senator McCarthy passes away in 1957. What did we think of McCarthyism? What do you think of it?
I think pretty much anytime you hear McCarthyism reflected, it's never really in a good light. It's always, a mistake. I mean, just to be factual, McCarthy never found any USSR Soviet spies. Am I right?
Was that his job?
That's what he set out to do.
Okay.
That's what his goal was. That's what that's who he thought, the enemy he thought he was fighting against. And if the enemy you think you're fighting against does in fact not exist, maybe all along you were fighting the good guys. Maybe you were the enemy yourselves. The U.S. and the USSR went through a period known as détente, where they got a lot, they went from, enemies to people who, could handle being in the same room as each other. And because, after all, if the U.S. and the USSR were to go into a nuclear war, that wouldn't be good for anyone. It's a lose-lose situation. And then we got to SALT, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, where both the government of the U.S. and the USSR limited how many nuclear options they had. And you see, in the 1980s, since Reagan started the Star Wars initiative, which was actually what it was called. Maybe it was because he was an actor, but he started the Star Wars initiative, which was basically that we were going to build up our military. So in a way, it was kind of sort of the end of détente. But the thing was, the USSR was so far behind, they just couldn't compete with the US, and we came to just totally outmatch them in terms of our military. And the premier of the Soviet Union, who was basically like the president, Gorbachev, realized the Soviet Union just couldn't compete. And the only way it could possibly survive was to open up, was to become more like the democracies, more like capitalism, more like us. So
through the late 1980s, we noticed in Eastern Europe, all these other countries, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, they decide they want free elections, am I right?
Yeah.
And then finally, the Soviet Union itself says, we no longer feel we want the government involved in our lives telling us what to do. And isn't that the end of communism?
And yeah, pretty much communism in, Eastern Europe. So in the end, it wasn't America that became like the Soviet Union with censorship, but it was the Soviet Union that became like America by allowing their people to be free.